fair and balanced.
News Talk Radio WOBM-AM 1160 and 1310 presents Townsquare Tonight. Your chance to speak with Jersey Shore newsmakers about the issues that affect you. Call 732-505-1160. Now from WOBM News, Townsquare Tonight on News Talk Radio WOBM-AM 1160, 1310 and WOBMAM.com.
America can't remain a world leader if its educational system deteriorates, and the problem with that is how you pay for it. We're seeing a lot of that in New Jersey. We're seeing the governor come up with an alternative to funding, which addresses the Abbott districts, by and large, but speaks to a larger issue of property taxes and income levels. All of this feeds into the situation in Freehold Borough. Densely overcrowded by hundreds, yet with an acceptable graduation rate and struggling. The $33 million bond referendum for expansion failed. This despite the advocacy of State Education Commissioner David Hespe and an administrative law judge. Why does this happen? What are the ramifications for Freehold Borough, and how does it speak to districts across the state? With that in mind, we bring in tonight to the town square Dr. Franco Godefroy, president of the Latino Action Network and professor at King University. He's attacked the matter loudly and at length. He's in the town square tonight to shed light on it for us. Thank you for making the trip in tonight.
Thank you, Tom, for having me. Always a pleasure.
As a footnote to everything that this entire preface, there's going to be an announcement tomorrow by State Senator Jennifer Beck and the superintendent. I have to figure that it involves funding and the bond, maybe not the bond issue per se, but some sort of breakthrough to break this logjam. Do you have any insight into that at all?
Well, we're hopeful. I mean, I was kidding with a parent in the Freehold Borough School District that I can't imagine Senator Beck having a press conference to announce that we're not getting money for the bond ordinance. That would be sort of a sad and dreary press conference. I would imagine, I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I have no knowledge. I've tried to find out a little bit more about it, but I just haven't been able to find out whether or not there'll be an announcement that the bonding ordinance for $33 million was approved. And we think it's so very, very important because the children are in very, very substandard conditions and not receiving a quality education there. And perhaps we can elaborate on that more during our interview here.
Let's elaborate on the background of what has led to this. Freehold Borough the population has expanded exponentially. That has not fed into surrounding towns necessarily. What is the syndrome here? Why is it concentrated there, and why hasn't it spilled over into other towns?
Sure. Well, I mean, as you know, I'm a historian, Tom, so I don't want to. I could go on quite at length on this, but after NAFTA was signed into law, the North America Free Trade Agreement, which is, of course, been a part of the presidential debate this year. Mm-hmm. The U.S. flooded Mexican markets with a lot of agricultural products, and that drove a lot of Mexican farmers out of business or put them into a desperate straits. So that fueled a mass immigration, large immigration, to the United States from Mexico, and that immigration went to the Northeast, which is an area that had not typically received a lot of Mexican immigrants. Latino immigrants into this area had generally been Dominican, Cuban, Puerto Ricans, of course, are part of the United States, right? So with that, you had an influx of Mexican immigrants to the United States. Freehold became a good location because it's the county seat, is a hub of transportation, and folks can ride their bikes around the town and get to work. And so that was an area that made it very attractive. It has a lot of apartment units in it relative to its size. And so you're asking why it hasn't spread. Some of the immigrants eventually, because this is a phenomenon that goes back about 15, 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
This community didn't just arrive there.
Right.
And so you started to see some moving into Freehold Township and so forth. The reason it's difficult is because New Jersey is not known for a very high-quality mass transit system. So getting around New Jersey can be a bit tricky, and if you don't have a car anyway. So I think that's a big piece of why the folks have congregated and concentrated in Freehold Borough.
Okay. How much of a percentage of this population remains undocumented?
Well, in the school district, very, very low numbers. We've gone over that with the superintendent quite a bit. And, of course, that becomes an issue for some of the taxpayers. They don't want to pay. I think that's wrong, but in any case, they don't want to pay for the education of undocumented children. But this community is largely, these children are about 90 to 95% documented.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a very important point to stress.
Yeah.
And, there's that old saying, if you think that education is expensive, you ought to try ignorance. And so the population is, United States citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And now some of their parents are not. And thus, some of the tensions in the borough over the bond ordinance.
Is this more of an issue? So now we're spilling into immigration reform, right? And is it a reluctance to become part of the system, or is it an inability to be part of the system?
When you say reluctance, I mean the parents of, if you're undocumented, of course, you can't vote in the school board. So if we're to go on the hypothesis, the theory that most of the children's parents are undocumented, or many of them, they can't vote. So they'd love to take part in that, but they're not permitted to vote. Thus, the urgency of the bond ordinance, because you have a very narrow, the referendums, two of them, have lost by very narrow votes,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the parents and the children who are most affected by this have no voice in that election. And yet the New Jersey Constitution is very clear. These children deserve what's called, to use the vernacular, the jargon, a thorough and efficient education. They're not getting that. They have auditorium. Their auditorium has been cut into classroom space. Their library is not really a library anymore. You can find an occasional book there, but they've turned that into instructional space. I mean, I'm waiting for them to convene a classroom in a broom closet. I mean, it's very, very tight facility. They are, I spoke to school officials recently, 600 or nearing 600 over capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they have 1,700 students in a facility that was built to house 1,200. So you start off your introduction saying the advocacy of the State Education Commissioner, Hespy. No, I think it's quite the opposite. I think he's been a dilettante when it comes to this matter. I think he hasn't done his job here. 200 days ago, an administrative law judge told him in her ruling that the schools are inadequate. They are over capacity. They're overcrowded. 200 days. If he had just read a page a week, he would have been able to make a decision. Her decision is like 22 pages. So what is keeping the State Education Commissioner, Hespy, from making a decision? And so we're very concerned about that. We think it's a disregard for the children in the borough who already receive less state education monies than others. And it's one of the 10, by the State Department of Education statistics, they're one of the most underfunded school districts in the state.
Okay, so there's been no communication with Commissioner Hespy since 200 days ago.
Yeah, 200, somewhere in the middle end of December, Judge Scarola, Susan M. Scarola, issues her decision, sends it to Hespy. Hespy had requested her to look at this case, and silence. Why? Why hasn't Commissioner Hespy done his duty and made a decision, yay or nay? If he doesn't approve it, we intend to sue the State
Now,
Department of
what is
Education.
it that he's supposed to approve?
Well, she recommended that the bonding ordinance, this $33 million bonding ordinance, which would provide 23 classrooms, a library, a gym, cafeteria, etc. If he approves it, that construction begins. And
So there wouldn't be a bonding ordinance. That would be a directive.
yeah, he would be directing the borough schools to withdraw that money to raise taxes to accommodate that bonding ordinance.
So people wouldn't get to vote on it.
Well, they've already voted. They voted twice to reject it
And it
by
failed.
narrow margins. I'm sorry?
And it failed. So,
The bonding ordinance has failed twice.
so what would the commissioner's action be to enact that? I'm not following you exactly.
Okay, well, just because the local voters don't want the children to have a proper education.
Well,
You asked the question, so let me say.
okay.
So the voters can turn down the budget, but the state is ultimately decisive in determining whether the students receive a constitutionally mandated, thorough, and efficient education.
Mhm.
If they're not receiving that, and the administrative law judge says they're not, they have to provide the additional facilities.
So this has to come out of the State Department of Education.
Well, how it's funded will be, something that Hespy, if he ever does make a decision, will reveal to us, right? Will he seek additional funding in the budget, the state budget? Will he order the Freehold Borough taxpayers to cough up the money? That is not clear to me what solution and what solution he'll come up with. But he has the authority to overrule the voters, if that's, what
Okay.
you're saying.
That, there's where I'm going with that. Okay,
Mhm.
so he's got that capability. This bond issue failed twice. You've pointed out that there are a lot of people who can't vote.
That's right.
Okay, if I'm a tax-paying citizen and I vote, and whether I'm naturalized or whether I'm native, why is it on me if someone else doesn't want to, or refuses to, or is unable to fulfill that commitment of citizenship?
Well, it may not be on you, but we live in a community. We're not just lone wolves out here. Everybody, survival of the fittest. We have to educate our children.
Right.
The state, the nation has a responsibility to educate our children. So because Tom is a little tight in the budget this year and he doesn't want to because for whatever reason, that doesn't mean that the students shouldn't have pencils and erasers and computers in their schools. There's a certain standard that has to be met. And it's only just. I'm
not arguing that point.
So-
I'm not arguing that point at all. Education is key.
So that's why
Now let's go to mom and dad and say, how about assimilating into this community instead of staying off the radar?
But there's so much implied in that statement. We've already established that they can't vote. So in that aspect, assuming they're undocumented, right, they cannot vote.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, if they're residents, legal residents, they can't vote either. They have to go through the process to become a citizen. So
Right.
they're left out of that piece of it,
All right.
rightly or wrongly. We could debate whether or not
Do you see
the
any?
children.
Do you see any movement in that direction? This is why this is not happening. Maybe if we go through the citizenship steps, then we've got a leg to stand on.
Well, see, Tom, now there you have hit on a national problem, right? The Republicans and Democrats
now I open that can of
all
worms, didn't I?
are just, they step over themselves and are incapable of resolving this problem at a national level. So this is how it trickles down to us. This is how it hurts us at a local community. Can't figure out what to do with 10 to 12 million undocumented immigrants, and therefore this confusion about their status persists, and it comes up in all sorts of different ways, and this is another example of it.
Are you disappointed in President Obama that he said he was going to do it the first 4 years, and then he said he was going to do it the second 4 years, and we're still here?
Well, I'm disappointed in him. He made a calculated decision. First of all, his deportations are through the roof, so I'm disappointed in him on that point. But he made a calculated decision in term number one to go for health care reform as opposed to immigration reform. That was a strategic political decision, thinking he could only get one or the other. In the second term, they tried to revisit that, and they're unable to. Because, we don't have a dictator, thankfully, and the Congress has blocked most of his initiatives in the last 4 years, certainly. So I don't think that rests solely with President Obama. I think that's mutual ineptitude of the
systemic,
Congress, and systemic ineptitude. Very
Quite a
good.
neat phrase. Franco Godi-Frere, the president of the Latino Action Network, is our guest. I usually like to let people know that about 10 minutes in, but this has been so engrossing that I didn't want to stop.
Yes, well, I just want to know, I'm the president emeritus now of the Latino Action Network. I'm the director of the Latino Coalition, in case Christian Estevez, the current president of the Latino Action Network, is listening here. So, but I'm still
next
involved.
time we got to bring him in.
Yes.
Right. We're going to step out for just a second, and we're going to continue this discussion. And stay with us, folks. We got a few more minutes right after this.
If you can't seem to stay ahead of your bills, then this message is for you. How would you like to have a large portion of your credit card debt, medical bills, and department store debt forgiven? National Credit Card Relief would like to give you free information on a proven debt forgiveness program. This program has been used by thousands to legally forgive millions in unsecured debt. It's not bankruptcy. It's not consolidation. This special program actually wipes clean the portion of your debt that is forgiven from what you owe your creditors. Call for free information and get all your questions answered in the first free call. The more you owe, the more you can save. If you have at least $10,000 or more in credit card bills, this debt forgiveness program can be very effective. Call for free information and find out more now. 800-218-6353. There is no cost or obligation for the information. Don't wait. Call 800-218-6353. That's 800-218-6353. Get your debt problem solved. Call 800-218-6353 today.
Are your federal student loans making life miserable? You may qualify to have your entire student loan forgiven with one free call. That's right. If you're a teacher, nurse, police officer, firefighter, or work for a nonprofit, then you may qualify to have your entire student loan forgiven. The Student Loan Pros want to give you free information on all the student loan programs that can help. And the sooner you call, the faster they can help. Get the maximum forgiveness, loan reduction, or consolidation available. Plus, find out in the first free call what you qualify for. Loan forgiveness specialists are standing by to answer all of your questions for free. Don't pay another penny in student loans until you call. If you have more than $10,000 in federal student loans, this free information could change your life. Call 800-226-0027. Find out how to wipe out your federal student loan debt. Call now. 800-226-0027. That's 800-226-0027.
Be a part of the conversation. Call now, 732-505-1160. Townsquare Tonight. News Talk Radio WOBM-AM 1160, 1310, and WOBMAM.com.
Welcome back, Tom Angeli, with our guest tonight in the Townsquare, Franco Godi-Frere, professor at King University, president emeritus of the Latino Action Network, and the director of the Latino Coalition. We have been discussing the situation in Freehold Borough, which may actually have a resolution by this time tomorrow. Senator Jen Beck and the superintendent of that district have an announcement at right about 12.
That's
Park
right.
Avenue Elementary. But let's extrapolate to, does this have any statewide implications or any implications beyond Freehold Borough? And with something with a statewide implication is the governor's fair funding formula, which he started a barnstorming tour about, which would be, I believe the figure is $6,599 per student across the board. Would this be another wrench in Freehold Borough, and what are the implications beyond that?
Well, Governor Christie never met a millionaire he just didn't want to hug. I mean, he is the millionaire's governor. And so his state funding formula for education is another abomination. And it's so classic Christie. I mean, he's one of the he is the worst governor I've ever seen in New Jersey in my 56 years.
That's quite a turnabout because you were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt in the beginning.
No, I mean, that's another Latino leader, not me, Tom.
Really?
I couldn't stand him from the minute he took office. I mean, he picked.
You had cautious optimism. Let me put it that way.
He picked a lieutenant governor who made her career by harassing immigrants in Monmouth County. That is Guadagno, who will probably run.
She's going to be in Berkeley Township this Saturday. You want to come and see her?
Give her my regards.
Okay.
But so the governor's funding formula is classic Christie, pitting the suburbs against the cities. When he says, it sounds like a nice thing, Tom, flat funding formula, fair funding formula. Everybody gets the same. But Tom, if you drive around New Jersey, some municipalities have a much larger tax base to draw from and others don't. So what the governor is completely forgetting in his formula is the systemic underfunding of urban and less wealthy districts over time. And that's a little bit of what we've been talking about with Freehold Borough, right? Mm-hmm. So if you give everybody the same, the kid in Colts Neck and the kid in Freehold Borough, that's not an adequate formula for a state, right? Because, and God bless them, the people in Colts Neck are obviously much wealthier, right? So they can infuse that education system with a lot more money. And like I said, good for them. They want the best for their children. But how about those kids in Freehold Borough? Those parents love their kids too. And so what about them? And they can't afford that. So if the state gives Colts Neck and Freehold Borough the same amount per student, how does that make any sense? Again, if we're thinking about a community here, Tom, not just a bunch of separate lone wolf municipalities. We want everybody to get a good education.
All right, but $6,600 is less than either Freehold Borough or Colts Neck is pouring in per student to their system.
Well, of course. I mean, obviously then the municipalities have to make up the difference. And so who does that... See, the governor is selling this magic potion of fairness, which is what he always does, like with his first budgets. Right, he said they're fair, shared sacrifice. But if you look at those budgets, they weren't shared sacrifice. They were squeezing the poor, helping his rich buddies. So
can you cite an example of that?
Yes. Well, he cut, for example, the Center for Hispanic Policy Research and Development by 75%. Now, how is that shared? So he really hit hard the foundation of the Hispanic nonprofit groups serving many inner city areas, working poor people, etc. He really cut into the muscle and bone of those programs. So other programs were cut modestly. 75% that was cut. So that's just one example going back in time. So this formula, like I said, it sounds nice. Everybody gets the same amount per student. And but obviously the tax base in each municipality is not the same. So how is that possibly going to be fair? So what he's doing there, it's so obvious, so superficial of him as he pits people against each other. He's pitting the urbans, school districts against the suburbans. And what he's done, most of his career here as governor is to try to undermine the Abbott districts, to try to undermine Mount Laurel housing, which tries to provide affordable housing throughout the state. And so that's what this plan is. It's another effort to get people to say, hey, let's be fair. What's going on here? Let's be fair. If you don't read, if you don't know the nuances of education funding, you would say, hey, this guy's great. I love him.
Fair's a great term, but
right.
What he's really addressing here, and I think that there's a subtext here that is not being caught yet, and it's something to which I always go back because I have to watch my budget very carefully. How is the money being spent? 31 districts have yet to prove that all of that money going in is resulting in achievement. So what is the purpose of pouring all that money in, and how is that money being spent? I got an idea how it's being spent, and it's not always on the kids.
Yeah, listen, there have been problems in some of the Abbott districts and, too many managers, if you will, top-heavy administrative structures in some of these places. But today, I was in Perth Amboy on business, and they have some really, Perth Amboy is an Abbott district.
Mm-hmm.
They have some really fine facilities there. I remember not too long ago, some of the schools in urban areas were falling down, were in real disrepair. So, I'm sensitive to your point,
Yeah,
Tom.
there are
I think
success stories. Union City's a success story.
Right.
Camden is not. Patterson is not. Newark is not. So,
So I guess the question is, how do we improve that? I don't see how the governor's funding formula addresses that.
Does it
Do you?
force district officials to, and we're running out of time, my goodness, does it force district officials to re-examine how they're spending their money so that not every ward healer and lackey has a job because they voted for somebody?
Well, the governor has always had this premise of he's wanted to open up to school choice, right? Which really is a code word for privatizing education. There's a lot of private companies, just like sometimes in this country, prisons have been privatized, right? So they want their hands on that education money. And Governor Christie, if he can do anything in his last year or so in power, year and a half in power, that's something I'm sure he would like to contribute to the growth of the charter school movement, which is a step towards, in our view, privatization, and then eventually a voucher system.
Franco Godey-Freire of the Latino Action Network, Latino Coalition, our guest on the Townsquare tonight. Thank you for coming. I want to have you back in October because we need to talk about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
We
and
sure
all the rest of
do,
the
Tom. We sure do.
17% of the population is Latino. Big swing factor. Townsquare tonight is a presentation of the Townsquare Media New Jersey's Shore News Division. Our technical coordination and call facilitation by the brilliant Mark Anthony. Video and audio coordination by Bradley James and Tom Tremblay. Programming consultant Steve Artelina, and Townsquare New Jersey's Vice President of News Operations is Eric Scott. I'm Tom Angeli. Thank you and good night.
This has been Townsquare Tonight, a presentation of WOBM News. To find out more about tonight's show and stay up to date on everything happening in your hometown, log on to WOBM-AM.com.
Enjoy the dry conditions and comfortable temperatures into the afternoon on Friday. It will be warmer by the weekend. Tonight, a clear sky. Winds will diminish and the overnight low will drop down to 61. Plenty of sun tomorrow with a high closing in on 80.